Welcome to the Franchise Woman podcast, where passion and purpose collide, profits are made, and relationships forged. I'm Rebecca Monet, CEO and Chief Scientist at Zoracle Profiles. You might notice that my co-host, Tracy Kawa, is missing today. She was called away to a in-house workshop that she needs to do today. But this interview today with Lauren I thought was so important. I wanted to go ahead with it. So I want to introduce our special guest today, Lauren Kruse. She's the franchise owner of Tint World Automotive Styling Center in Kennesaw, Georgia. Lauren and her husband took what once was a Mexican restaurant and turned it into a high-end boutique aftermarket custom vehicle shop during the height of the COVID pandemic. Lauren lost her husband a few months later, and today she carries on her husband's passion for cars and continues his legacy. Lauren, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you, Rebecca. I'm excited to be here.
I tell you what, ever since you and I were on the phone a few weeks ago, I have thought about you and prayed for you, knowing everything that you have gone through in this last year. I'm wondering if you could share with our audience this journey, because you weren't considering being a franchisee. You were a successful realtor. So tell us a little bit about this journey into franchising.
Yes, absolutely. So as you mentioned, my late husband was a huge car enthusiast. From day one when we met, he always had what he called his daily driver, and then he had a hobby car. And he would always have a vehicle that he was working on and, hands-on, teaching himself how to do different things. He's very entrepreneurial. So I always knew he was not going to be a typical go into the office 9 to 5 type guy. That just wasn't his style. And I supported that. So a few years ago, he came to me and he's like, I have a niggling for something. I'm like, well, this doesn't sound good. What does that mean? And he had started to do research on opening up our own business, a car business. But neither one of us, I had my real estate business, but we didn't have any experience in small business ownership. And so we had never thought about franchising. We never had the discussion of franchising, but he knew that he wanted to own something of his own. And so through his research of looking into how to own or open your own car shop, he came across Tint World and was, starry-eyed from day one of finding them, to the point where he flew out. Their headquarters are in Boca in Florida, and asked his father, who is, very well, business-minded and has had businesses of his own, I need you to fly out with me and just be the critical eyes, because I'm in love. I want to do this, and we've got to convince Lauren. And so really that's how the journey started of entering into the world of becoming franchise owners. When I say owners, we were married, husband and wife, so we owned it together, but I had almost no involvement whatsoever in the startup process of it. He really ran, the operational side. I attended a week of the new owner training that Tint World holds in Boca. But I had my own real estate business and we had 2 other kids. And so I really was not in the nitty gritty like he was. So we opened our store in July of 2021, and my husband very unexpectedly passed away September 29th, 2021. Wow. And so we had a very small period there. It took about a year to get to opening, and 2.5 months after we experienced that opening, my husband passed away. And so, I was left with the decision of what to do with this business. We had these 2 other children. I was 6 months pregnant at the time. And all I knew as a way to support my children financially was, selling houses, helping clients buy and sell houses. And so on paper, because I knew nothing about the automotive industry, on paper, the decision to keep the business made no sense. And in fact, I think everybody's assumption was just that it would go away. We sell the business, reach out to Tint World, like somebody else in this area. It's a thriving, perfect demographic for this shop. Somebody will come in and purchase it, like just get rid of it. And a few days, it was in the first week after my husband passed, and it was on my heart so deeply, keep this business. Do not
Wow.
let this go. The shop is 15 minutes from our house. I pass it every single day. It's on a very highly traveled, parkway that I would pass pretty much daily. And I knew I could not pass what he had built from that Mexican restaurant to this beautiful boutique style, high-end aftermarket car shop. I couldn't pass what he had built every day and know that I had just let it go or given up on it. Second to that, with two small kids, they called it Daddy Shop, and they still call it Daddy Shop. And it's this tangible thing, this tangible way for them to see what their dad loved so much and what, really drove him and made him passionate in something that he built. So on paper, it made no sense, but here we are a year and some change later, and still working to carry on his legacy through solely owning it now.
Wow, what a crazy roller coaster this must have been. A couple things that kind of hit me as you're sharing this, Lauren, is one, your father-in-law had a critical business eye, and Tint World passed his critical eye. So
Yes.
it wasn't just your husband fell in love with Tint
Right.
World, it passed a mustard, so to speak, with your father-in-law that said, this is a great business model that will work. And then the second part of that is this was your husband's passion and what he saw as potential, a legacy and a means to provide for his
Yes.
family, but you picked up the torch. But you didn't have a love for cars like he did. So
No.
did the passion grow for you? Did you fall in love with this business like your husband? Tell me all about that. I'm really curious.
Yeah, I think I'm still in the process of falling in love. So it's been a slow process. No, I'm kidding. No, I had my husband, sometimes he'd be like, did you see what I did to my car? Now I took off this wrap and I put on this wrap and I changed this wheel. And I'd be like, oh my gosh, like, people really care this much about people really care this much about cars. And I have started to care that much about cars. I'm like, what is happening to me? No, prior to any of this, I was not a car person. To me, it was, my car's job is to get me from point A to point B. In fact, before we had our first child, I drove a Toyota Camry. It was like a 95 Toyota Camry. It had over 200,000 miles on it. And I could have cared less. I'm like, well, it gets me to where I'm going. And when we finally got pregnant with our first child, my husband was like, let's just at least get a new car, because what if it breaks down, and, you're going to have a baby now. Who cares? It gets me to where I need to go. I don't have a car payment. I don't need a new car. So the irony in now owning a business where every customer who comes through our door, they don't have to spend money with us. They are choosing to spend money because they are choosing to add something to their vehicle that's going to make it prettier, that's going to make it sexier, that's going to provide a service that doesn't need to be there, but it's going to give them enjoyment. And so the fact that that's what I do now for a career on my day-to-day, there's some irony in that. But I have for sure begun to develop a passion outside of it just being through and for my husband, more so, separate, that I'm enjoying it myself. The industry itself I don't think you can be in a tint world or in a shop like that and not enjoy it. There's fun music, there's cool cars. The people who come in are so passionate about what they're coming in for. Even if you're not a car person, it kind of bleeds off on you. And so I'm around that every day now for the past year and change. And so I think it's just kind of naturally and organically unraveled into a deeper appreciation for that whole industry.
It's so funny because I never thought about the car business being a sexy business, but Tint World really is, because it is aftermarket. These are choices people are making to take care of their baby, their car, right? Something that they have great joy in. It's a way of expressing their own personalities, I guess. And so it really is a sexy kind of business. So I'm guessing you're going to get some really high-end cars. What kind of cars are you seeing in your shop?
So we have had the excitement of having, everything from Lamborghinis, a ton of the Teslas, exotic, beautiful, fun cars that, arguably for a lot of people cost more than their home.
Mhm.
But then we also have, which is great. The exotic, when those come in, my employees are like, oh my gosh, I get to drive this around into the bay, like I'm so excited, give me the keys, where I'm like, I don't want to touch it, you do it. And so that's exciting and cool when you have these expensive, exotic, really, really cool vehicles.
Mhm.
But on the flip side of that, you also have like the 2015 Honda Civic, and it's the college kid, and he's taking every little bit of his money that he's worked for that's left over to put into a stereo system. And he probably loves that vehicle just as much as, the CEO who's driving a $300,000 Lamborghini. And so that's a really cool piece of it. And we also see, the women who come in and want certain wraps or decals on their vehicle, and you're seeing their creativity through that. So it really runs the gamut of what we work on and what we do. But the one similarity through all of it, I think, is for most people that they're equally as excited and passionate about their individual vehicle.
Yeah. It's so funny because I think back to years ago, my first sports coupe. It was a Lexus. And what sold me on it was that it had installed an aftermarket sound system. So
Mhm.
yes, the lines of the car were sexy. It was a
Yeah.
beautiful, beautiful vehicle. But what really sold me was when I sat in the car and I turned on, in those days it was CDs, right?
Mhm.
And the sound. And I remember stopping at various friends' homes and say, come listen to the sound system in my car. They were enamored with the outside. I was enamored with when those windows went up and I was in that car by myself with my own thoughts.
Mhm.
But I was hearing no one else could hear in this same
Mhm.
way. It felt like a really special relationship that I had with my car. And it sounds
Mhm.
like a lot of your customers, it is a relationship that they have
Mhm.
with their cars.
It is. And I think that it's what I have come to realize, and it's almost an experience that is created for them through their vehicle. So, and I'll expand on that. So my husband, I mentioned, always, had to, and he would never drive a stock car. He would take a stock car, stock Impala, stock Camry, and do so many aftermarket add-ons and just customize it to people would be like, what type of car is that? He
What
would
is
get
that?
stopped
What is
all
that?
of the time. And his eyes, like the pride and the twinkle, and I just like never totally get it. Like, I'm like, that's so good for you. I love that that's your thing. I don't get it. Well, I kept he had a Infinity, and it carbon fiber hood, carbon fiber fenders, aftermarket wheels, all the things wrapped. And it's primarily in our shop in the showroom, but I will drive it here and there because, it needs to be driven. And almost every time I drive it, people honk at you, they roll your window down, they're like, cool car. And you get out of it and they're like, oh my gosh, I love that vehicle. And it does create this sense of like pride. I'm like, this is what he felt all the time. And so I think for people, a lot of it is, they do have this relationship and love for their vehicle, but it's also when they're adding on and doing these cool, sexy, whatever things, it's the feeling that it creates and the experience that it creates for them as well. And I never thought that I would connect with that. And now I'm like, oh, I'm feeling a little sassy today. I'm going to drive the Infinity around,
Like a
and
sassy.
you get into that. It's fun.
Oh my gosh, I love it. Yeah, I can totally relate. I'm kind of a car nut myself. So
Hmm.
I can appreciate the way your husband thought about these things and that feeling of driving someplace and having others look at this beautiful thing that
Right.
honestly he created, right?
Yes.
This wasn't stock. This wasn't off the assembly line. This is his
Yep.
own creativity coming together. And now your customers doing the same thing. So
Mhm.
talk to me about this change from realtor
Mhm.
to Tint World franchise owner. Not only were you dealing with the death of your husband, but you
Mhm.
were also now making a massive career change. how did you deal with that? And how were you also able to use some of your skills from being a realtor in this business? But let's talk about the psychological first and how you were able to get through all of that.
Yeah, I mean, it went, obviously our lives were turned upside down. I mean, the trauma of just, because there was no, any death of a loved one is traumatic, period. I fully believe that. But there was no preparation. I mean, our lives went from normal to upside down in the span of a knock on the door. And so to lose my husband, who was, my best friend, we were together we were 19 and 22. And so, I mean, we grew up together. We were kids.
Wow.
And we had built this life and had these beautiful babies and had a third one coming. And we always dreamt together and supported each other. When I wanted to leave, my career, I had a career with Costco and open up my real estate business. He was like, babe, do it. When he wanted to leave the company he'd been in for forever and buy and open up a Tint World, I was like, babe, do it. And so that, that person, to lose that, everything shifts. I mean, your world is turned upside down. But to also carry my children's grief, I mean, that is something that is just so much heavier than my own, because they're my children.
Wow.
And then to be 6 months pregnant at the time, it was a lot. I have a very strong faith in God. I don't know how anybody gets through normal day-to-day life, but the storms of life without a faith in the Lord, that's what just carried me through. And like I said, when I had that feeling on my heart to keep this, and when I said on paper, this makes no sense, but I prayed about it so much, and I trusted that God was giving me this desire and continuing to lead me down this road of keeping Tint World and keeping the shop, that he would find a way to provide and create a path to make it seem more realistic. And it took a while for it to, and I still am constantly in the process of learning and growing. And, this up and down, any first year of small business ownership, you always hear is so hard. So no matter what, this would have been a difficult year. If my husband had been alive and been here, we would have been welcoming a new baby and, new business owners. It would have all been difficult. But to go through that with the grief process and stepping into an industry that I knew nothing about just added all those additional layers onto it.
And an industry that's male dominated. So we
Very
have
much.
loss of a husband. We're shifting from being a realtor to taking over a business that initially you had no passion for. It was something you felt the Lord was calling you to continue, and then being pregnant, having 2 other babies, like you said, your world is upside down at that, so that your faith really did carry you. I mean,
Yes.
it's almost like you have no choice but to have that.
I mean, yeah, there were days where, I was living in 24-hour size compartments, and sometimes smaller than that. Just get through this minute, get through this hour, get through this day. And really, I couldn't see much past that. You're just sort of like in this survival mode. But I think that foundationally believing God's goodness and foundationally believing that he is a provider and he will see a way through this for my family and I mean, that was the only thing that allowed me to carry on, especially in those early days. I mean, still now, but especially in those early days. But then, and the other caveat to that was the amount of support from family and friends, from the Tint World family. I mean, when we had our grand opening, we had opened in July as a soft opening, but the grand opening was set for, I think, October 7th or 8th. It was exactly like 1 week after my husband passed. And initially I was like, well, we can't do the grand opening. And we ended up keeping it. And we had all of family and friends and, people flying in from my husband's service. And so his service was on Sunday. We did the grand opening the day before on Saturday. And we saw it as this way for the community to really pour in and acknowledge and see what my husband had built through the shop.
Wow.
But for that grand opening, Jeff, the COO of Tint World, flew out to do the grand opening along, with me, because I just wasn't in a position to even, carry that on a week after. And from that moment on, the support from all of the people corporate at Tint World. I mean, they just came alongside, and I am in a very unique situation. And I am more of a unique owner, somebody who didn't intentionally get into this to solely have a shop by themselves. But the support through them as well has just been bar none. I mean, very few. I'm new to the franchise world, but I think that it's very unique that I know I could reach out to anybody in the office, shoot them a text on their personal cell phone number and say, hey, like, I don't know how to handle this situation, or where can I find this? And I'd get a reply like that. I think that that's very unique for the franchising world.
I think it's and I know Charles well, and have watched him over the years, and it really is part of the culture at Tint.
It is.
That it is a family kind of feel. And of course, you know, stepping up in your time of need is something to be applauded by Jack and Charles and the rest of the team. What an adventure, what a roller coaster for you. And you still seem sane. Just
I'm kidding.
It's just amazing.
The grace of God. I'm just kidding.
By the grace of God. And honestly, yes. I don't know how people do it without that kind of faith. I mean, it really becomes, you know, a rock that you can stand on, something that you can hold on to. So you had this experience as a realtor. Now you're a franchisee. Could you see any transferable skills or thought processes of being a realtor and how that's helped you with?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for one, one of the number one things that helped me scale my real estate business and grow to, you know, have a very successful career in the real estate world was how I treated every single client. So whether that client was buying a multi-million-dollar home, or, you know, they were buying a much smaller first time, you know, property for themselves, that my client care is the same and consistent to everybody. And it has never been in my real estate business transactional. It's always relational. So it's not, okay, we're selling your house, on to the next. You're helping me buy, on to the next. It's like, let me get to know you. Let's build a relationship. Now you're in my database for forever. You know, you're invited to events, and I want to, you know your kids' birthdays, and I want to become friends with you. And so naturally and organically, when people feel like they can trust you with the biggest investment of their life, which for most people is buying or selling a home, they're going to refer you business. Well, when we were opening Tint World, my husband was the best at that because he was just, you know, a big teddy bear softie, but everybody who came through that door, he treated with so much excitement, love, and respect. And so we had this vision of opening up a shop and saying, everyone who comes in here is going to be treated the same. So whether they are that, you know, a minivan getting 2 front windows tinted, or, you know, a McLaren getting a full sound system and full tint and ceramic coating and paint protection, they're treated the same. And that translates. So I think just doing good business and expecting good results from that, that's a huge piece of my real estate world that I have brought over to the Tint World side of it. I also think just the foundational knowing of how to run the ins and out of a business, I was able to translate to the business side of Tint World. Because when I did initially take over by myself, I didn't know anything about anything. I didn't know how window tint was installed. I didn't know anything about systems. There's still so much I don't know. But one of the pivotal moments for me as an owner, and I think this would be so important for other people who are thinking of purchasing a franchise or being a franchise owner, is I had to get to the point of realizing I don't need to know how to install a speaker, and I don't need to know what chemicals are in this ceramic coating and all of those details. I wanted to, because I felt like that was going to make me a successful owner. What I needed to know was how to take the business model and running a successful business that I'd learned through real estate and apply it to Tint World, and then have the right people who could do all those other things. And so I think for anybody who's thinking of owning a franchise, was a pivotal, important piece for me to get to, is that I don't have to know everything, but I do need to know how to run a successful business.
Yeah. And I think that is a key point in franchising in general. We don't need to know, you know, the chemical composition of something. Maybe that adds to our confidence a little bit, or just our knowledge. We do need to know how to take care of customers and how to manage employees and, be strategic thinkers. Or certain things that we do need to know. So which brings me to another topic, one that's been kind of heavy on my heart lately with the change of the employment market, the labor
Mhm.
force, let's call it. Tell us about that. Now, your employees are skilled employees. What they
Yes.
have to do, they have to be trained at doing. Um, so how has that been for you? Are you having any difficulties finding good employees, keeping good
Mhm.
employees, building your team?
Yeah, I think that was one of the pieces that I was least prepared for of the difficulty of just the ins and out of the employee stuff. Finding good people, retaining good people, the ups and downs that kind of come with having multiple employees. Because different from my real estate business, I mean, it's a different type of employee and a different type of structure. And so that was something that I did not foresee as being one of the more challenging pieces of owning a small business. And it has been one of the more challenging pieces. I think that one of the things that has really served me well, and it was a precedent that my husband set from the beginning, was treating employees well, the exact same as treating customers well. So prior to opening our business, my husband and I were actually very intentional about, we prayed of the employees that God would bring our way. We prayed for people saying, we know these are individuals that are going to be spending more time in our shop than with their families.
Mhm.
At the time, it was my husband was going to be spending more time with them than with the children and I, because that's what most people do with their careers. You're in your workplace or you're with your coworkers more than your own family. And so we prayed for people that not only could we pour into, but that, could pour into us as well. And that would be a mutually beneficial relationship where everybody felt appreciated. And so that has not always been done perfectly, because no relationship is, but I think that that's something that has done really well in my shop. And one of the things that has served me well is really taking the time, and I'm able to, because I have, under 10 employees, is realizing what kind of makes each employee tick, and taking the time to know it is not one umbrella of, this is how the shop is run and this is what we do and boom, 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 but really understanding, okay, this employee, really loves to hear words of affirmation. So I'm going to be intentional in telling her on a weekly basis that she's really doing X, Y, and Z well.
Yeah.
And this employee really is incentivized by, maybe little bonuses. And so when they do this amount of vehicles, there's going to be this reward at the end. And I think that that's a critical part of any business. But when you're in small business ownership, it really helps create the loyalty of people feeling connected, and that it's more than just a clock in and clock out job. And then that employee feels a deeper level and sense of investment into the business, which
Mhm.
serves you as the owner well, but also them and their personal needs as an employee well.
Lauren, I think this is such an important topic, and I'm so glad you brought up the words of affirmation and the way someone feels appreciated. It's kind of the idea of the 5 love languages that many of us
Mhm.
have studied in relationship with our spouses. But it sounds like you've taken this idea of the love languages and applied it to your employee-employer relationships also.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, that has been something. And again, and I think, it is a more male dominated industry, and so maybe my perspective being a female is different. Um, but it's not some people I think could easily view it, and I need to adjust that. And so what I have found is that when I really connect with each employee and tap into their needs, that's when I get the best results. And I think across any board of business, small business, industry, whatever, that is such a useful tool for owners, managers, supervisors to implement.
Right. I totally agree. And I think this is a big takeaway for anyone listening today is if you haven't studied the 5 love languages,
Mhm.
take a moment to do so and see how it applies to building a team, building a sense of family,
Mhm.
doing what is necessary to have employees feel loved, appreciated, significant. We're in
Mhm.
a world where robots are taking over and technology is taking over, and we need to take time to truly appreciate those that are working with us. And like you said, pouring into you while you pour into them.
Well,
So
and I think a lot of it's very easy to think like, okay, well, if I pay them well, and then they need to do X, Y, and Z, and
yeah.
they're making good money. Well, one of the really eye-opening things to me has been through conversations with multiple my employees where they have stated, yes, they need to make a good living, but that's not what drives them.
Mhm.
Especially, in my industry, they do have trades and unique crafts. What drives them is their ability to be creative, and what drives them is their ability to feel part of something and appreciated. And so, as an owner or a manager or supervisor, when you understand that the level of performance that you can get out of your employees, not only does it increase and multiply, but then you have a happier employee as well.
Yeah, happy employees equals retaining that employee too.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, as you pointed out, greater performance and greater commitment and greater loyalty. So
Mm-hmm.
shifting gears a little bit, Lauren, what's next? What's next for you personally? What's next for you in your business at Tint World? What does your future look like?
Ooh. So personally, my priority are my faith and my children. So that's number one. I think we are still so close to the loss of my husband, and we've had so much growth as a family over the last 14 months, but we're not that far away from it. And so I think part of us, we are learning to live more instead of just exist and be in survival mode. So personally is still continuing to see my children grow and thrive and heal and find joy in life and, experience things. For me as a Christian personally is using the life that we've had and the pain that we've experienced as a family and use that to bless or touch other people. And what I mean by that is being transparent with my story and willing to share it and willing to testify to God's goodness through it. That as a woman and as a family, I have experienced the absolute gut-wrenching fall on your knees moments of life, and I've still been able to look up and praise God through it. And so that is my number one goal on a personal level. From a career standpoint with Tint World is continuing to see the business grow and thrive. I have so many visions and dreams of, you have this one shop, and I look at it as here's the shop, and then I see all these little tentacles, all these little
Mhm.
avenues that there are to grow and expand off of this one shop. And that's, commercial, really growing in the commercial tinting world and really growing in the residential and really getting more involved in car shows and all these visions and things that I have that I'm really just now, because, I delivered my daughter in January, and she was born with some special needs and on oxygen. And it was a whole thing even after her birth, to where I'm really just now in the position where I'm starting to have the time and just the brain power to wrap my head around how I want to see the business and the shop grow. So I think the future holds a really exciting things for my shop and for Tint World in Kennesaw, and but still taking it a day at a time.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. I wasn't aware of the issues with your baby. I, you
Yeah.
know, you're so right, and I'm so glad that you're testifying to it. There is no way one human being can do everything you're doing. It's just not
No.
possible without a faith in God and without a turning to Him for
Mm-hmm.
wisdom, guidance, strength, whatever it is, and then being receptive to the support of Tint World or your family, your friends, your church family also.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way any
Right.
human being can do what you have done. in the last year and a half that you've been going through all of this. So I want to commend you for being a testament to that. And I think your testimony will have a far and wide reach when others are experiencing similar situations, that they turn their face up, to the heavens and say, hello.
Yeah, I need you.
I trust you.
Yeah.
I need you. I trust you. So wrapping up, how will someone learn more about Tint World? What's the best way to learn more about Tint World?
Yeah, great question. So for us, and I think anybody now, is they are all so accessible, the whole team at corporate and headquarters at Tint World. So even just getting on their website, I mean, everything, they have so much information just on their homepage of, who to contact and how to start the process. One thing that was so beneficial to us was the willingness, and I think that goes back to the culture and the family vibe that Tint World has just created, but the accessibility of other owners. When we were first coming into it, my husband, as we mentioned, was the starry-eyed one. I was always the one, like, a little more skeptical, like, something sounds too good to be true, usually. And so I called other owners and really was like, hey, I want to honestly hear, what do you really think about this? And so that's a great place for people to start, because some of, the majority of the other owners are so willing to share their experience. And no matter how great of a model, you're always going to have hiccups and ups and downs. And, the ability to share, hey, this is what I did, and it didn't work out great, so try this. But for anybody who's interested, getting on Tint World, and yeah, I think there's actually a button you can click and, call somebody at corporate and start that ball rolling.
I love it.
Where are my other ladies out there? I need some other ladies.
Exactly.
If you love cars, come on. Even if you don't love cars, you're going to learn to. So come on.
Exactly. Bring on the ladies. Absolutely. Lauren, I want to thank you for making time today and for opening your heart and telling us your story. I think it's going to be inspiring to many women considering business ownership, no matter where they are in their stage of life, that business ownership might be something to consider. And what I thought was really interesting is this passion has grown for you. It didn't start out as a passion, and it is a legacy that you're continuing for your husband, and bringing your children up in daddy's shop, right?
Yes.
Yeah. How they see it. So I think that's beautiful. So thank you again.
Thank you so much.
And thank you to the rest of you listening in today to The Franchise Woman, where passion and purpose collide, profits are made, and relationships are forged. We'll see you next week on another episode.